Okay, so once again, I want to try to figure out how I'm going to go about trying to tell the story of the legend of Beaver Dam Atlantis. So the story is an Atlantis story, and Atlantis is an ancient civilization that existed 10,000 years before the Greeks, or so-called at the beginning of the Holocene perhaps, or even before that. And 10,000 years ago, there was a great civilization of Atlantis. And this civilization collapsed. And there was a great disaster, and everybody died. So here we have the Beaver Dam. Okay, these are just AI art-generated images of beavers and beaver dams. And so here's a beaver dam. Here's a beaver dam. Yeah, it's all of these different AI renditions of beaver dams. There's all these beavers in their rapid water. So I'm not sure how to go about it, so I'm just going to make this long video where I just talk about trying to make the legend of Beaver Dam Atlantis. So the basic premise of the story is that the legend of Atlantis is actually about a civilization that existed where they built a bunch of beaver dam analogs, or perhaps they lived with beavers building beaver dams everywhere, and nearly the entire culture existed on a network of wetlands where people lived on these wetlands, and it was a huge area, just nothing but dams and wetlands as far as the eye can see. And one time there was a giant disaster, and the dams kind of at the top broke, and the cascade of water that came down from these top dams breaking caused all the dams below to break out. So maybe if it rained a lot for a while and the water just kept building up, and then the dams at the top failed, and just too much water already going with too much water, and then all the dams wiped out one after the other all the way down, killing everybody. Only a few people would have escaped such a disaster. There is some Legend of Atlantis storyline where there was actually war, and so even though in Plato's account, the Legend of Atlantis is that the Atlantean army was going to come and destroy the Greeks. Before they could do that, there was an earthquake, and it wiped everybody out in Atlantis, which would line up with the beaver dams. But I kind of like the idea that somebody broke the dams on purpose, and the dam collapse is actually what caused the earthquake felt by Plato's Greeks. So it wasn't that there was an earthquake and the dam broke. It was that the dam broke and it caused an earthquake. So here's Beaver Dam Atlantis. This is how much I've done work on it. So right, so in Plato's Atlantis, the Greeks could not access Atlantis over land. They could only go there by sea. And I have an explanation for that. And so in the Greeks' Atlantis, Okay, so here's not a very good picture to use for. Let me just bring up a world map here somehow. Alright, so in the Greeks, Atlantis, dang it. Here's Greece, and the legend of Atlantis is that the Greeks would have to sail out the Pillars of Hercules, which is a real thing. So here is the Pillars of Hercules right here in the Strait of Gibraltar. You can see both sides in its cliffs. So they would sail out through the Pillars of Hercules, and then Atlantis, is it out here? Right? That's what everybody does. Is it out here somewhere? But I propose that they could have accessed it by land. But the Greeks, for example, that civilization was all sailing, and they only went a little ways from the coast. And they didn't cross a lot of land. You know, they had roads in Greece and stuff like that, but their whole culture was, okay, so here's the thing is, crossing land is extremely dangerous, because if you have 20 guys and you want to cross from Egypt to Western Sahara or Mauritania, and you're gonna get a caravan together and you're gonna walk from Egypt to Mauritania, and it's not the desert or anything like that, it's just anywhere in the very ancient world with 20 guys. You're gonna have valuables. Someone's gonna attack you and get your stuff. So you would be expecting that you can't just go wandering off for 1,000 miles. I mean, journeys for the Greeks were like this far. You know, they would have a big journey and go over here. I mean, that's not even that far. That's 20 miles or something like that. 20 miles away is a long journey when you've got a little carriage. So it would be possible that the Atlanteans would live on land near the Atlas Mountains, but the Greeks wouldn't know how to get there over land, and if they would have ever tried, somebody would have attacked them and killed them. That's basically the premise there. So, a major concept of the legend of Atlantis is that Atlantis was a secret. Okay? You didn't get to know how to get there. The only people who knew how to get there were the Atlanteans. And if you tried to get there, they would stop you across land and say, if you go any further, we're gonna kill you. But people would not know that those were Atlanteans. Those would just be people who were sworn to protect Atlantis, and they would never tell anyone that they were Atlanteans. They would say there's something else. And then if people came across the sea, then they wouldn't be allowed to go there either. But there was ways that you could, where they could take you out to sea and then back to land, so that you think it's a different place. And you would be able to tell them it's an island and sail one direction at night and do all kinds of trickery so that when they got there, the coastline could make sense. You know, I mean, you would be able to do it in such a way that if people were going to sail with you, then you could hide that Atlantis is right here. And if the place looked so different, so different, then people would believe that it's some fantastic place that's not anywhere near. But of course, there would certainly be people who knew. But Plato's telling a legend from 10,000 years ago. You know, and so the legend would be that people did not know, even though in reality there would be people who knew. The fable that people would repeat for generations might leave that out, you know, that there were people who knew, but there was lots of people who did not. And the argument to why people would want to keep it a secret is, well, what about goods that are being traded and you want the price to be high? Where did this come from? This came from Atlantis. Magnificent is a journey so far. We have to charge you this huge price. It's crazy. The only way you'll get the thing is if you pay. There's the button that I've been looking for. So, Atlantis' location was a secret. Is part of the story. The fable. Okay, and what happened was, here's the meat and potatoes of the fable, is that they took a river and a whole river valley and filled it with beaver dams. Not really beaver dams, because the beavers weren't building them, or maybe they were. So the river valley that I'm suggesting, I mean, some people think it's the Senegal, but I'm suggesting that it actually would be the Tamanrasset River. So here's Atlantis right here. And there was all these beaver dams. Here's my beaver dams picture. And there were so many beaver dams everywhere that it's a wide river. The reservoirs are all connected in such a way that you can sail. You can sail from here. You can sail down to here. And then you can sail up the river for a long ways without ever getting out of a boat. And then the way these dams work is, you know, beaver dams, they're not big, tall dams. It's not like a modern-day locks. So in modern-day locks, you gotta close the gate. You gotta raise the water level. But with beaver dams, if there was an opening in the dam and the water was coming out a lot right there, so it was high pressure, well, you can't necessarily just paddle your boat up a channel where the water is moving really fast through that channel, but you could have people who are standing on the ground with ropes or pulleys, or you can have people who are on an anchored platform on the other side of on the top side of the dam, and then they could heave the boat with ropes and pulleys up that channel. Let me see if there's a way to find a picture of what this channel might look like. No. So if you build like a partial blockage of a river, it's hard to see here, but yeah, so these dams here, they're gonna result in all the water moving really fast through one part, but not really moving. So the boat could come up in the back of this blockage right here, right? And then when it's time, then people who are standing on the ground could be connected to the ropes, and they could just pull it over into the fast-moving water while they're gonna heave it up to the next level. And so you could actually go up from dam to dam, raising the elevation of the boat just by pulling the boat with ropes. And I'm 100% sure that this was something that did happen. I don't remember where I seen it, but in school books for children, they would have pictures of that. So that was a thing that really was done. So it would be possible to take a boat, you know, way up into this area where all the dams are, and then you would just be going with your boat around reservoir to reservoir, and you could have, 10,000 years later, the fable might make sense that it's all water everywhere, that it's an ocean with islands, islands in the oceans, when the reality is it's actually a giant dam network. So it's complicated, but... And then, of course, somebody would have had to break the dams to get them to collapse like that. But then that would be like this whole thing where the true story is that when people first were building the dams, it took a lot of work. They were very dedicated. But as technology changed, people would want to have more time for other technology that would give them less time to have a lifestyle that is constantly dedicated to maintaining a network of dams that took a lot of manual labor. So even though the whole culture would depend on it, just over time people would close enough and good enough and kind of let things go when they wouldn't have originally, generations pass, and people just start letting things go because they're worried about other dazzling new things, until eventually the state of the infrastructure of that whole region was in kind of fragile, and then a disaster did happen, like a really heavy rain, and then it wouldn't have broken it at one point, but because nobody was taking care of it quite the same as they used to, then it broke it at that point. Alright, that's a long enough video, but I'm just trying to work on how I'm going to organize this into the legend of Beaver Dam Atlantis, into a fable. And alright, thank you very much.